When you build a bridge to the community, that's what sometimes will let people get to know you in ways that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise.
Hi, I'm Karl Vaters, and welcome to the Church Lobby, Conversations on Faith and Ministry. My guest for this episode is Darrell Stetler, and we'll be talking about how to do a great trunk or treat at your church. Darrell is a small church pastor in Oklahoma City, and he's created a free 23-page guide called Trunk-orTreat Planning for Churches, a step-by-step guide. We're putting this podcast out in August because over the next 2 months, over 1.2 million people will search online for Trunk or Treat near me, and we want to help you be one of the churches that they find. So, in this conversation, Darrell and I will be talking about the benefits of having a church trunk or treat, how to pick a theme for it, who it's designed to reach, how to reach those people, when to begin the planning of it, how to recruit volunteers, how to gather information from those who attend, how to follow up on them, and a whole bunch more. Don't forget to stick around when the interview is done. I'll come back with my quick take on why bridge events like this are especially important in the smaller church. Welcome, Darrell Stetler. It's good to have you in the church lobby.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Karl. Good to be back with you, I guess. It's been
Actually, you've been on the podcast before, but you've never been in the church lobby because I think the episode you were on was the last one under the old name, Can This Work in a Small Church?
That is correct. It was. That's at least that's what you told me, so I'm going with that.
Yeah, it was. So episode 38, if anybody's interested, and I encourage you to go back, it's a discipleship strategy small churches can actually follow. And just so for everybody to know, it's actually our most listened to podcast ever.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that. Okay.
I didn't until I went in to look at which one it was, and I went, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Episode 40 is the second most one. I think that was the one where we talked about sexuality. I figured that would be the top one all the time, but somehow you beat out the sex one. So
I'm not even sure what to say.
Yeah, I know, right? But that's hard to do. So yeah, that's the most popular one so far that we've ever done, the most listened to. So maybe you've got only yourself to get better than for this one. You're competing with yourself today, Darrell.
Right.
So
All right.
you create so much great discipleship content. So first, for everybody who isn't familiar with what you do and who hasn't listened to that previous podcast, give us a quick up to speed about who you are, where you minister, and what you do.
Sure. So I'm a small church pastor in Oklahoma City. I've been here for just past my 21-year anniversary, actually. It's the only church I've ever pastored right out of Bible college. My wife and I moved here, and we had 0 kids. And so during that time, we've gone from 0 kids to 7 kids. So I'm blessed and tired. I've also, about 4 or 5 years ago, I started creating discipleship materials, or actually kind of packaging things that I had created and saying, how can I help other pastors be able to have a clearer pathway to discipleship? I've discovered that about 75% of pastors that I survey on my email list, which pastors can join if they wish to do that, they said the number one problem they had with discipleship is they didn't have a clear plan. So I just started creating discipleship materials and saying, how can I help guys know exactly what they're going to do when a brand new Christian comes and how they can walk with them for the first 1 to 2 years of their walk with God?
Yeah, I encourage anybody who's looking for that kind of material. It is specifically designed from a small church standpoint for small churches, but not just exclusively for small churches. It's just, But if you are in a small church and you've ever had the experience of trying to get through some of this, and you can tell that it's coming from a big church standpoint and some of it's hard to adapt, this will be easy to adapt in any size of a situation. And we'll put links to his material in the show notes. But we're not going to be talking about that today. Today, we're going to be talking about a free 23-page guide that you created called Trunk-orTreat Planning for Churches, a step-by-step guide. So the first thing I want to ask right out the gate is, why trunk or treat? Why should a church even think about doing trunk or treat? I know it's been a thing for a couple decades now, but what's the point?
Sure. So The thing that I feel like is important about understanding that is that it's tagging on to something that the culture is already thinking about. Americans spent 9 billion years, sorry, $9 billion last year. Let's try that again.
Yeah.
Americans spent $9 billion last year celebrating and decorating and whatever else for trunk or treat, not for Halloween. So trunk or treat is just an effort for churches to do something that is family friendly in the context of something that the culture is already doing. I don't look at it as a Halloween celebration particularly, but I do look at it as a way to tag onto that. In fact, just for the record, there are 1 million searches. I ran the numbers just a minute ago. There are 1 million searches every September and October for just the words trunk or treat. And if you go one step further, in the month of October only, there are 1.2 million searches for trunk or treat near me on Google. So 1.2 million people are searching for that event. Somehow they kind of like it. It connects. It's a family friendly sort of thing. It's a safe thing instead of your kids randomly going and knocking on people's doors. It's a safe way for people to celebrate a Halloween holiday. There's more to talk about why I think it's okay for churches, but we'll do that at your convenience. But that's why I think it's important, because it's already in the cultural consciousness.
Yeah, yeah. And trunk or treat has become this name. It used to be, they used to do harvest, festivals or whatever, and all these cities that don't do any harvesting, but they had a lot of cars. And I think that's where it came. It sounds like trick or treat. Everybody's got cars with trunks. Not everybody is in a place where they have a harvest. I think that's where it came from. Not that it really matters. But you did, mention, there are some folks who really don't think the church should be doing anything even adjacent to Halloween. And if that's you, I'm not sure why you're listening to the podcast to begin with. But for those of you who are, and even more so, if you're a pastor or you're a leader in a church and you're looking at doing trunk or treat, but you've got people in your church who are thinking that anything that we do that even touches close to Halloween is somehow pagan or wrong, here's what we're going to offer you. We always do bonus content for this podcast. And what Darrell and I are going to do is we're going to do a few minutes, about 10 minutes or so probably, on why it's good for churches to do trunk or treat. And usually for the bonus material, what we do is we put it behind our subscriber wall. So if you want any bonus material from any of the other podcasts, you've got to become a subscriber at karlvaters.com/subscribe or a supporter at karlvaters.com/support, and you'll get the free link that only subscribers and supporters get for all of the other bonus material. But for this bonus material with Darrell, we're going to make it free and open to everybody. Here's why. So you can send a link to a 5 to 10 minute video from us to a skeptical church member who doesn't think you should even do anything Halloween adjacent. It may or may not help, but we want to give you that one tool that you can use. So we'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. So for now, let's step aside from that because we'll put it in the bonus material. And let's get to some of the actual practical things. Let's walk through the process that you lay out. In the guide, you go through 5 different steps. And let me walk everybody through them, and then we'll start going through them piece by piece. Choosing your trunk or treat theme, creating appropriate decorations, selecting the best candy for your participants, promotion strategies to ensure a high turnout, and activity ideas for maximum fun for all attendees. So that's the basic outline of your guide. Let's go through it question by question. First of all, when we do a trunk or treat, who's the target? Who are we doing this for?
Sure. So the goal is to do it for the community. We do, at least at our church, we had never done one before. And my children's pastor came to me and said, "Hey, I've got this idea for a trunk or treat, and I want to do it in a way that themes with Bible stories instead of just being kind of a random, let's give kids candy in a parking lot." She said, "I want to theme these things together." And so, by the way, this is just a side note, but when creative people come to you and say, "I have an idea," let me just encourage you to say yes, because a lot of times what it looks like, it comes dressed in work clothes. And it's like, oh, somebody's got to execute this, because sometimes the most creative people may not be the most full of execution. And but if you can say yes as often as possible, first of all, it'll keep them happy and help them use their gifts in a really valuable way. And sometimes it winds up being a really valuable and exciting thing. And
I fully agree. The way I phrase it is try to figure out a way to say yes.
Yes, exactly.
So it might be yes, but at the beginning, it might be I'm not quite sure, but your default shouldn't be how can I turn this down? Your default should be how can we turn this into a yes?
Exactly. Yeah. There are two kinds of people in the world. There are yes and people and yes but people. And you want to, as much as possible, you want to be a yes and person. Yes. And let's talk about how we can make that happen. That's the way you want to have those people. Yes, but people are important, but you want to have those yes and people in the room early on, especially when the ideas are floating around. So she came to me and she said, that's what I want to do. And so we turned it into what I call a bridge event. So we have several of these sprinkled out through the year where it's something that is not just come to our worship service, because that's a hard sell for a certain segment of people who probably are never going to easily walk inside the doors of your church. But when you build a bridge to the community, that's what sometimes will let people get to know you in ways that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And so we call them bridge events, and we do a series of them kind of sprinkled out through the year, a block party, a school supplies giveaway, and those kinds of things. And one of our anchors, in fact, the first one we ever did 13 years ago was Trunk-or-Treat. And so we call it the Gospel Trunk-or-Treat. We actually call it, our public facing name is Candy Through the Bible. So we advertise it that way, and we just let them know that it's a family-centered trunk or treat. And so we've kind of gradually over the course of time, we've created a database of people who have been there in previous years, and we text those people and let them know, hey, trunk or treat's coming up, and then we can invite them to other events as well. So it's a very community-facing event in that way.
Okay. So how, though, do we be sure that we are reaching the people that we're targeting? What are some steps that we can take to start doing that? Because I know that's a big part of what you lay out.
Yeah. So I didn't want to just create something where we just fueled up the kids with high fructose corn syrup and sent them home to detox. I really would prefer that we give them something that's good news, and we use a creative way to do it. And in all honesty, it was my children's pastor's idea, right? So she's years of experience. She came to me and she said, I want to do this thing. And I said, well, tell me what it is you're thinking. She said, all right, so I want to tell Bible stories all around the parking lot. And I want to, when we get kids to come up first, I want to give them, we're going to tell them the creation story. I want to give them a Milky Way candy bar because God made all the stars in the Milky Way. And then she said, I want to do the story of the fall, and I want to give them like a apple Jolly Rancher or a caramel apple sucker and talk about how sin broke God's law, and it broke God's heart, and it broke God's world. And then she said, I want to talk about how God sent a hero. He's going to promised he would send a hero to fix everything that sin broke. And by the way, that becomes the theme of the rest of the trunks, like how God sends the hero. And so we theme them all around Jesus. So we tell at each of these trunk stations, we tell the story of redemption we tell the story of Noah and the ark, and we give them Skittles, the rainbow that God made a way to protect people from his judgment and from his judgment on sin. And then we tell the story of Abraham and Sarah, and we give them a Laffy Taffy, because Sarah laughed, but God still kept his promise, and he was beginning to bring the hero into the world. And then we tell the story of Rahab on the walls of Jericho, and we give them a Twizzler, like the red rope that they hung in the window. And we talk about how people who were not part of God's people can be adopted into God's people, and they can be part of the people of God. And we work our way the rest of the way around. We tell Jonah, and we give him a dumb sucker because it's a dumb thing to do, to run from God. And so everybody reacts basically just like you did right there. Like the parents are engaged, the kids obviously are engaged. We're telling stories and we're trying to make it exciting. We've got little actors there for David and Goliath, and they're throwing slings and falling down. And so it becomes this creative way to engage people with the whole story of the Bible that they probably haven't heard from any individual sermon, and they probably are not going to hear from anybody else's trunk or treat in town. And so that's what we try to do. We try to center it around the gospel.
Okay. I hear where you're going, and I'm going to be really vulnerably honest here.
Okay.
I had a hard time not rolling my eyes at how cheesy that is, Darrell. It's so cheesy. Tell me why cheesy works. I'm not going to pretend it's not cheesy. It's cheesy.
Absolutely.
So tell me why cheesy works.
So it's like, it's campy good, it's
there we go. Campy campy's even better than cheesy. Yeah.
So the people that come, sometimes you'll see people, but there's a good-natured kind of eye roll, right? Where people are like,
Hmm.
oh, I didn't see that coming, It's for the children, but in the process, we hit the adults in the process. Like they're engaged. I would rather see people engage with the scripture. The truth is that what we believe could come across as a little ridiculous sometimes. Like, hey,
Yeah,
there's this
well,
guy, but he was
hmm.
God, and then he cared enough to come down here, and he became one of us as a little baby, and then he died. He was so good they killed him, and then he's coming back on a white horse. Like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it could sound a little ridiculous, but we just try to embrace that idea and tell the stories. And when we tell the stories, we laugh. I'll grin, and that's a dumb thing to do. And I'll put dum dums in their little sack, And the parents laugh, and the kids grin, and it's just one of those moments. It's a fun, silly Halloween. Besides, you're talking to little zombies,
Yeah.
like you're it's really easy not to take yourself too seriously. And sometimes, hear me out on this, but sometimes over the last 50 years, I feel like Christians have sometimes taken themselves a little too seriously. So it's a good
Maybe.
opportunity to laugh and to
Yeah.
share the gospel in a creative way.
Basically, what we're saying is embrace the camp.
Yeah,
It just is that it is campy, it is cheesy, but campy sticks.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
sometimes our more sophisticated ways, which I prefer, quite frankly,
Sure. Yeah.
aren't as memorable. I'm thinking back to the old days of the used car sales ads on TV, right? It was the ones that had the weirdest, campiest, goofiest costumes, but they had some kind of a tagline that just stuck. We had a guy here in Southern Cal who sold mattresses. It may be national, I don't know. And his tagline at the end was, "Find a cheaper mattresses anywhere. Our mattress is free," and he'd yell, "Free!" And yesterday we were watching something on streaming that now is having ads. And this guy came on. I hadn't seen him in 30 years. And at the end, he didn't do free. And Shelley and I looked at each other. We were so disappointed. It's the cheesiest, goofiest thing ever. But the moment we saw him, we knew he was that guy, right? And it
Yeah.
sticks. It
Yeah.
just stays in our
It's
memory.
memorable.
So it is a campy thing. Might as well embrace the
Yeah,
camp. So
sure.
let's talk specifically about some small church things, because what are some unique benefits to the small church for something like this? And let's also talk about what are some of the challenges that small churches face in trying to put on a good quality product of this kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is as a small church pastor. So our church runs about 100. We're not a massive church, and we don't have, huge resources to throw into things, and we can't outglitz the big churches.
Mhm.
But this is very organic. We have people every year, frankly, that go to other churches sometimes, and they come to this and they're like, "Hey, we look forward to this every year. We bring our kids through it, because the temptation is to feel like if we can't get it to a certain level of excellence, we just don't do it as a small church. And I say, no, just do the things that you can do. I think it's super valuable just to go forward with it and do it. So this is very doable. It can be run with 20 volunteers. It can be done. If you've got 30 or 40, great. That's fantastic. Do that. But it can be run on a bare bones sort of volunteer situation. One of the big benefits to me for a small church is that it pulls people together. I think that as small churches, we need an occasional event that is an all hands on deck event, because it pulls people together. You have to try to do something big. And so for us, when we went into this, I was a little bit eye rolling the first year. I was like, oh, okay, I got to go do this thing. And we went in and we said, let's plan for 200 kids. And we had like 400 show up. And we
Wow.
didn't really expect that. We were kind of blown away by it, and we scrambling. We sent people to the store for more candy. But man, when we got done and we were cleaning up, we were all tired and our voices were gone. But there was a buzz in the room, like that. There was a crackle in the room, and I feel like
Wow.
the effort to align all of your resources and all of your time and your prayers a couple of times a year to do an event that's hard and where it's like all hands on deck. There's something about that brings people together and stretching to be able to get something done. So I feel like it's really beneficial for the church culture to do something hard.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So what would you recommend for a church that maybe has a very small facility and they're trying to figure out even where to hold this? What are some ideas about where this can be held?
Yeah. So if we have a church parking lot and people park on the street and walk up, and it's kind of a chaotic time in our community, if churches don't have a big enough parking lot to manage 10, 12, 13 stations at a trunk or treat like this, then I would say partner with somebody in the community. If it's just not a possibility, partner with a shopping center on the nearest corner to you, and make sure you have the ability to communicate with those people in the future. That's a huge tip that I blew the first year that we did this. We got done with it. We had 400 people come through, and I got done and I said, "Oh, I have no way to, I didn't collect any information. I didn't collect any names. I have no way to let them know about the next step." And so anyway, we'll talk, I will talk more about that in a minute, but I would just say, look for community partners. If you can find a little store or a shopping center, grocery store that would let you do it on that night, yeah, go for it. That would be an effective way to do it. Or get two or three churches together. I have seen a couple of churches do this together. They've used the gospel Trunk-orTreat system. When I share that with them, they don't have the space themselves, and so they partner together to do it with another church. And some of the people from one church did stations, and some of the people in another church did more stations. And so, figuring out ways to partner together, I think, is probably the easiest way forward.
Okay. I assume that if you can physically get people on your church property, that's going to be a better bridge to reach them for further events. Is there any evidence that having them physically on the property actually does help bridge them, or does it really not matter? Am I just making an assumption that may not be based in fact?
So we've always done, I can't really speak to it exactly because at our church, we've only done it at our church location. And most of the churches that I've partnered with to do this in other locations, they've done the same. Like they have just done it at one church did it in a field right across the street from their church, and other churches did it in their back parking lot. Different people, most of them have done it on the grounds. I would say that we haven't seen like a massive attendance spike from it. We really haven't, but that's small church ministry, right? You're regularly doing things where you are interested in connecting with 3-4 families out of that really, but we have seen, we've definitely seen people come back and come to our church worship service. And every year we're trying to layer on and do a better job of follow-up. And so that's what we're attempting to do a better and better job of every year. Like, what's their next step? What are we inviting them back to?
Yeah, let's get to some of these very practical steps, and we'll finish up with the follow-up on that. First, how do we recruit volunteers? You got a small church, maybe you got a small church full of mostly seniors. You're trying to do some of this to be able to bring in some younger folks and younger families. Where do you get the volunteers for that? And are there any cautions about who you recruit and what position you put them in?
Sure. So you do want to be careful that there's policies in place, to protect kids and things like that. If somebody needs to go to the bathroom, there's 2 people that walk them back to the bathrooms, et cetera, or you have doors open, everything is public. You want to be careful of those kinds of things. And you don't want to put your grumpiest person on the greeting, obviously, and things like that. But when it comes to recruiting volunteers, we've seen people come out of the woodwork. I have people who don't attend church here who call me and say, "Hey, are you doing that trunk or treat? Can we come volunteer?" Because they knew about it from the past. They just wanted to follow up and do it again. I have people who don't attend church here who reach out and say, "Do you need some candy for your trunk or treat?" Because it does cost, money to purchase all that. So there's different ways, there's different levels you can get people involved. One of the levels would be purchasing candy. Well, they can't, get out that night or whatever. They can't be there that night, but they could purchase 500 Smarties for the Solomon trunk. There's a variety of ways they can get involved at that level. And then there are the people who are just going to decorate a trunk. So what I find is that if you can make it really practical and you can say, okay, here's a slideshow of sample trunks from years past. So every year we've taken pictures of our trucks. And so we've that way, somebody's not starting with a blank slate. They're looking at 3 or 4 or 5 different ideas from the past that people have done. So I feel like providing a little bit of training for your volunteers so that it's not just, okay, you're going to design a blah, blah, blah trunk. Now go for it. It's like, here's the things we've done in the past. Do you have any questions for me? You feel like this is something you could do? All of a sudden, that makes a lot of difference. Additionally, I have found over the years that personal recruitment works better than pulpit announcement. If you just stand up and say, "Hey, we need volunteers for our trunk or treat, sign up in the back," you're probably going to do less business than you would if you said, I'm going to make a list of 10 people that I think would help. And I'm going to call them and say, hey, could you hang around for 10 minutes after church on Sunday and let me just show you this thing? So I have actually provided that in the Gospel Trunk-or-Treat system. I've got all of these slides, like you can train your volunteers and do all that kind of stuff. Like here's the kind of stuff that we're going to be creating. So anyway, that's all part of that system. In case you don't have to go on Pinterest and find trunks, I've got them for you. But
yeah. And now a short break to talk about something else. If you like the content you're hearing, here are 2 things you can do to help us. First, forward this podcast to a friend. Secondly, consider becoming a financial partner on an ongoing or one-time basis. Just go to karlvaters.com/support, where you can give through Zelle, Venmo, PayPal, or Patreon using your bank account, credit, or debit card. This will help us as we continue to put these resources into the hands of the people who need them the most. I agree. On the personal request, is something that I came to far too late in pastoring. I'd do the general announcement, nobody would show up, and I'd get mad at the congregation. But when you back that up with a personal invitation and you walk up and say, hey, that thing we've been talking about, that trunk-or-treat I announced? Yeah, I think you'd be great at doing such and such with that.
Yes.
All of a sudden people feel seen, feel heard, feel appreciated.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're sitting there with their arms crossed. I'm not doing it until I get a personal invitation. But it's just that when the personal invitation, 1, it reminds them of it. And 2, it makes them feel like, yeah, they're special. And if you can target, I think this would be a good role for you. You got such decorating things. Let's have a trunk, or, you'd be great at security, or whatever they felt and heard and appreciated, which is important for everybody. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. So all of that you mentioned earlier about, people bringing in candy, are there other expenses that are a part of this, and how do those expenses get met?
Yeah. So the expenses that you have really come down to, doing some outreach in different ways. So flyers, banners, that kind of stuff that you might want to use. It depends on your location and how well you have foot traffic and drive-by traffic and things like that. We also have done some Facebook ads. I've actually designed ads and put them out there. The most successful Facebook ad actually we've ever run, we spent, I think, $200 on. We got it in front of a bunch of people, and we asked, I actually walked through a process for this, but if you text your people and say, hey, would you comment and like and share this thing, which we've boosted as a post, it has good effects. And then also we created a really clear call to action. So I said, to sign up, text OKC Church to 33222, which was our short code at that time for our texting service. It's not now, but really clear, like they could sign up, and then I automatically followed up with a reply to them and say, hey, thanks for signing up for our trunk or treat, going through it like that. So that was the most successful Facebook ad we'd ever run. People were responding to it. It was a really clear call to action. They'd grab their phone. They were already on their phone probably. So they just send that text message real quick and sign their kids up for trunk or treat. So those are some of the kinds of expenses. And so we have those things, and you can reuse them the next year. Pull out your banners and leftover flyers and do all of that stuff. So it's not and rerun that same Facebook ad from a previous year. So that's the stage we're at. But if people want to fast forward that, they can use the graphics I've created if they wish. But
okay,
yeah.
When should the planning begin? How soon should they start working on this?
So my experience is that you want to start aggressively planning about 8 weeks out. In August, you want to sit down and start saying, here's the conversations we need to have with 3 or 4 key planning leaders, kind of the core leaders. Let's choose and select our theme. Let's work with what trunks can we do. Start making a list of people that we're going to recruit for volunteers, and we're going to have these personal recruitment conversations you were just talking about. Start working on some of those things, and then you start making it public, and you start getting everything in place. Personally, if you want to save a lot of hours, I would recommend buying somebody's system or getting somebody's system who's already done this before. I would recommend fast forward your prep and already have, your checklists and your speeches and your slides and your banner designs and your Facebook ads and all this kind of stuff already put in place.
Yeah, and I don't know who I can imagine who might have such a system that they might be able to get a hold of, Darrell.
Yeah.
Uh,
If I
no,
see someone,
I
I'll pass it on.
yeah, no, you have been very light-handed on that promotion, but I do want to talk about that. You do have a system in place that can save people a whole bunch of frustration, a whole bunch of hours, and we'll talk about that and we'll link to it. But before we move to that, I want to talk about the one last thing on some very practical things. That is, how do you take advantage now? You learned the mistakes of not getting anybody's information that first time. So what do you do at the event to get people's information, and then what do you do to follow up with it afterwards?
Yeah. So we have, because we've invested in like texting here at our church, like a text messaging list, textedly.com, but that's honestly just there are a lot of different texting services out there, and that's the one we happen to use. If you create what's called a short code or a keyword, so if you create a keyword, so ours is OKC Church, like all one word. And if they
Right.
text OKC Church to this, and we have that right there at the actual sign up place where we have a big start here sign. So people come up to that place and we sign them up, say, hey, would you like to be in the drawing for the $50 gift card? And if they say yes, then you say, okay, do this right here, text this to this number right here. And as soon as you do, it'll automatically sign you up and we'll let you know about future events like this. So over the course of time, we have about 300 phone numbers that we've collected, 300 families that represents, and we can promote things. So we promote our other events and things like that. So that's one of the ways in which we follow up. And so I've found myself is that if you treat that list like it's an actual person instead of just promotion, that you wind up with better results. So after the trunk or treat is over, I will text them, hey, thanks for coming to our trunk or treat. Did your kids enjoy it? Okay, now that's a conversation. Now and so they're a
Okay. Yeah.
lot more likely to text back and say, yeah, they had a great time. Thank you. Well, then you get a chance to say, fantastic. I would love to invite them to come to our kids' church on Sunday morning. And we have a special thing that we're doing, blah, 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 whatever that looks like for the individual church or that individual year. We're starting a brand new theme about finding hidden pirate treasure in the Bible. I don't know. I'm coming off the top of my head here, but you get
Sure.
the idea of whatever the next step is, you engage them and then you offer a next step. And so that's how we do it. For a long time, we did. If people don't say, I don't want to set up the trunk or treat texting, I don't still want to set something up like that. Well, in that case, just collect their info on your visitor card. Just say, hey, we're going to turn all these in we're going to do a drawing after the trunk or treat's over, and we're going to do gift cards. By the way, side note, but we always get local businesses to donate the gift cards, and they always do it. We've always just reach out to local business. Hey, we're doing a trunk or treat. Expect about 500 people to come through. Would you mind to donate a $50 gift card or whatever? And so usually we get local businesses to do that. It keeps down the expenses and makes that more possible. We've also figured out ways to reach out to other local businesses. We have we do hot dogs while people are waiting, and we get Sonic to donate foil sleeves and, just some of those kinds of things. So if people are looking for community partners, you can definitely reach out and partner in that way. But that's how we try to do our follow-up and just encourage people to share their information. I think it's Seth Godin that talks about what he calls permission marketing. It used to
sounds like
be,
Seth Godin.
yeah, it used to be that your marketing strategy was let's interrupt a lot of people's program, or let's,
Yeah.
but that has all kind of gone aside. And now it's like, I'd like permission to start a conversation with you. Here's an incentive for you to start talking to me. And then you have permission and you have their phone number or email or whatever it is. And you reach out to them and provide value for them. That's how I would encourage churches to think about the follow-up as permission to start a conversation.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. You got to provide some value, which is what Trunk or Treat does for them and for their kids. You got to ask permission to communicate them, which is what the card does or what the text does, and then follow up them after that, after they've given you permission to do so.
Absolutely.
That is a huge, huge part of communication today. And yeah, the blast and the interruption, it hurts quite often more than it helps. It's just not the way people give you permission to do that anymore. There's so much more we could go into, and you got the full 23-page guide. How can they get the guide to begin with? What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'm going to provide a link because it's actually on a blog post that I wrote. I wrote this long, extensive blog post about what we do, and then just turned it
Okay.
into a free downloadable guide so that you can print it out if for people in your church if you want to, and that's obviously free. And then the Gospel Trunk-or-Treat system is not free because it's a whole lot of other whole lot of things, including graphics and slides, and we have audio of all the stories because we did that back during COVID. We did a drive-through trunk or treat, and so we recorded audio and in English and Spanish for all of the stories that we do. And then I've got a script and an 8-week checklist and a coloring book. Actually, that's one of the follow-up things we did. I forgot to talk about. We provide a
Oh,
coloring book where there's a QR code. They can color the picture and they can scan the QR code and they can hear the stories again. And so we partnered with a local organization to create that. And so it's a neat system that can be found at a link in your show notes as well. So the best way probably is if they're listening is just to click the link down the show notes and you can
yeah.
download the 23-page guide. You can also go to the Gospel Trunk-or-Treat website and find that as well.
Yeah. And I really do encourage folks, first of all, take these ideas and try them for yourself. Secondly, invest in the system. Darrell's done so much work here. And in most of our small churches, one of the biggest challenges we have, quite frankly, time is tighter than money. Tight as money is.
Sure. Yeah.
Time is tighter. And if you're going to invest the time in doing it and invest the money in doing it, invest all the people in doing it, don't make the mistakes that Darrell's already learned from.
Yes,
you can take
please.
some shortcuts and do it right the first time. So I really encourage you. We're not doing this as an ad for Darrell's system, but in what I've read through it and the things that I've seen and what I know he does, the quality is going to be there. You're going to get some value out of that. We're going to break for a moment and we will come back. We'll do the bonus system that you'll be able to get. And again, the links will be in the show notes. We will be doing a bonus content. It will be available to everyone, whether you have the link or not. We're going to do a bonus about something you can send to your church members who are skeptical about doing trunk or treat and whether or not it's appropriate for churches to do anything that even touches on Halloween at all. The link to that will be in the show notes, and it's something you can send to any one of your members. For any of the other bonus content for any of our other podcasts, go to karlvaters.com/support to become a monthly supporter, karlvaters.com/subscribe to get our free monthly newsletter. And if you are either a supporter or a subscriber, you will get all of the links to all of the show notes. All of those are only for supporters and subscribers, but we'll be doing this one for everybody. So you can get that information to the people in your congregation who might be skeptical. But before we do that, before we conclude out this podcast, I got the lightning round questions for you. You've already done them, but it's been a while, so maybe some things have changed. And on the technical stuff earlier, by the way, if you're thinking, oh, these two guys, they're so good technically, we couldn't do that text to church stuff because these guys are just highly technically proficient. If you were around for the 20 minutes it took the two of us to be able to talk over Zoom, you would realize you don't need to be highly technically proficient for this to work. Just throwing that out there.
It's true.
All right. Here are the lightning round questions. What are the biggest changes you've seen in your field of ministry in the last few years, and how have you adapted to them?
And honestly, COVID was a big earthquake, but I feel like in many ways we're moving past that. Political division and polarization has been a huge issue and is sad to watch. But ultimately, I think the single biggest thing that is impacting the people that are in our churches and the people in our culture right now seems to me to be some form of loneliness. There's so much. We have the curse of 10,000 acquaintances, right? We have 10,000, 5,000 Facebook friends and nobody to call when things go bad. So I think it's a crucial moment for small churches to do what they do well, what they really ought to be able to do well, which is connect people together. If we can manage to connect people well, we're trying to do that with connection groups at our church and with, one-on-one discipleship stuff and things like that, really plugging people into mentorship and connecting them with somebody who can actually walk with them. So huge loneliness epidemic ought to be an incredible opportunity for small churches.
Yeah, I don't think there's been a time, certainly there has not been a time within my lifetime where people are more aware of their need for the things that small churches can excel at.
Yes.
The whole felt need things was a big thing that came in 30, 40 years ago. But back then, their felt needs were not directly related to the core of the gospel like they are today.
Wow.
Today, their felt needs are right matching up with that, and especially in the small church environment, I agree. Second question, what free resource like an app or website has helped you lately that you'd recommend for small church ministry? I'm going to recommend your free 23-page guide on how to do Trunk-or-Treat.
Good segue. All right. I am kind of an appy sort of guy, and I enjoy good apps, but I haven't found anything new. I've been trying to stand down a little bit from that side of things, and I haven't found anything brand new that's like an app. One thing I do love that I've started doing the last year, I went kind of analog and I bought a wide margin ESV preaching Bible that's goatskin. I've never spent that much on a book in my life. I really love it. It's a preaching Bible, so every verse is on its own line. It's got wide margins, and I've preached through Romans and preached through, and I've marked it up, and I've got my outlines in there, and so I've just loved that. It's not a free thing, I'm afraid. So let me tell you one thing that is free that I enjoy, and that is some of the like interlinear resources that are out there online. It's incredibly easy to do Bible study stuff these days. So I'll be in service listening to somebody else preach. And because I have a hard time sitting still while other people are preaching, I will grab it and I'll search James 1 interlinear. And so I will follow along and do word studies on what he's saying while he's going through. It's just my way of interacting and engaging the scripture. And so we've never had it so easy as we do now for Bible study.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for those of you who aren't aware, interlinear is, it will take the English and then the Greek or Hebrew side by side so you can see what the actual original language is said and what the words were translated into English as. I agree. I use that tool an awful lot there. And you used to have to spend a ton of money to get the tools in your library that are now free and accurate online.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
it's unreal.
Very, very helpful. Third one, what's the best piece of ministry advice you've ever received? Or since you did it already, you can give us your second best.
Okay. Yeah. So I think loving people and caring about people is just this timeless advice. You have to care about the people that you have in front of you. John Maxwell talks about valuing people and put a 10 on the forehead of everybody that you look at. I think that when people feel loved and valued, they become more and more a part of what you're doing. Years ago, my dad, I was talking to my dad, who's a pastor. He's a small church pastor. And he said, a lot of these colleges, they don't teach people how to love your people. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Yeah, they do teach them about Greek and Hebrew and things like that, but they may not teach them how to love people. I've never forgotten that. And I do want to try to love my people really well. I don't know if I always do it as well as I should, but I feel like it's super, super valuable advice. And it's something small church pastors are uniquely positioned to do well.
Yeah, agreed. All right. From that sublime, let's get to the ridiculous. What's the funniest or weirdest thing you've ever seen in church?
Okay. So I don't know let me do this one. Okay. Because so we had a situation where somebody totally misunderstood the assignment for our Trunk-or-Treat. And they came dressed as a zombie with like blood running down there, and they had like a cobweb trunk, and they just showed up. This was not in our system. It was not in anything that we had said.
So they weren't even part of, they thought, hey, everybody show up with a trunk ready.
Exactly. Somehow they thought that's what was going on. And my children's pastor is coming to me like in total panic mode. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put her trunk right after the fall, and we're going to give the kids no candy. All right. We have no candy that goes along with it. We're going to put it right after the fall, and we're just going to talk about how sin brings judgment. And that's what we're going to do. So it worked out just fine, but we have laughed about it ever since.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. At least you didn't put it right after the researrection to symbolize all the dead who are walking around after the graves opened up. That would have been
that could have been memorable.
Yeah, that's misunderstanding the assignment for sure. That's amazing. Hey, if anybody wants to follow up, this is going to be a very link heavy show notes, maybe the link heaviest yet, because there's so much going on. What's the best way for people to reach out to you to find you online?
Sure. If they go to get.newstartdiscipleship.com. They can find out everything that I do as far as discipleship stuff that I've created. So get.newstartdiscipleship.com. See, it's the biggest overview of the kind of things that I put together.
Yeah, we'll have that in the show notes. We'll have the link to the 23-page free guide in the show notes, to the system in the show notes, to the original article about this in the show notes, to all the other stuff that he referenced in the show notes. We're going to keep busy putting all those links in there. But I encourage you to get this and to take advantage of as much of this as you can for your next Trunk-or-Treat experience. With that, we are going to be doing this separate video on my YouTube channel. There will be links to that in the show notes as well, so that you can send something to the skeptical member of your church who thinks the church should not do anything to acknowledge Halloween, or maybe on Halloween night, we should all just be in the sanctuary praying the demons away. I say that lightly, but I understand that people have very serious objections to this, and we want to take their objections seriously. But we also want to give a proper explanation as to why we believe that it's okay, and in fact, a positive thing for churches to engage like this. So we encourage you to be a part of that as well. But for this podcast, thank you, Darrell, so much for all of the valuable wisdom you shared today.
Privileged to be with you, Karl. Thanks a lot.
As I reflect on this conversation, I can't get past the cheesy, corny, campy factor of it all that Darrell and I talked about already. But something I've been learning over the years is that if the church is only doing things that appeal to me, which is the non-campy, non-corny, non-cheesy stuff, if that's all we're doing is the stuff I like, then the church is too much about me. And people need safe alternatives for their kids. I'm not saying every church should do a trunk-or-treat. If you have theological issues with it, I respect that. But when churches avoid events like this and fail to provide an alternative, it won't mean that kids are going to stay at home on October 31st and that people won't dress up anymore. It'll just mean that we'll miss another chance to connect with the community on something they're asking for our help with. This episode was produced by Veronica Beaver. It was edited by Phil Vaters. Original theme music was written and performed by Jack Wilkins of jackwilkinsmusic.com. The graphic design is by Solomon Joy. And me, I'm Karl Vaters, and I hope to talk with you again in the church lobby.